They were Hitler's last line of defense, elite SS units trained to die for their Führer. But when the bunker collapsed, their fate became one of history's most gripping mysteries. If you value documented World War II history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. Now back to the story. Trained to die for their Führer, they stood as the last shield against an unstoppable tide. The SS units assigned to Hitler's bunker were not ordinary soldiers. They were elite, meticulously selected, and indoctrinated from youth to embody unwavering loyalty. From rigorous physical conditioning to ideological instruction, every aspect of their training reinforced the belief that the Führer's survival was paramount, and that obedience was a moral imperative. For viewers, this is the moment to understand the extraordinary psychological conditioning that created men willing to place duty above their own lives. These bodyguard units were organized with precision. Hierarchies were strictly enforced, roles clearly defined, and communication lines efficient. Every officer and enlisted man knew his position, from perimeter security to close protection, and the consequences of failure were starkly clear. Within these walls, obedience was absolute, and questioning orders was tantamount to betrayal. Audiences experienced tension as they realized the human stakes behind such discipline. Individuals trained not just to follow, but to internalize authority as sacred. The mindset of these men was shaped by years of ideological immersion. From early indoctrination in Hitler youth programs to adult service in SS formations, they absorbed a worldview in which loyalty, purity of belief, and sacrifice were intertwined. Civilians, enemies, and even fellow soldiers outside the inner circle were often dehumanized, while devotion to the Führer became an unquestionable standard. Viewers are drawn into the psychological complexity. These soldiers were conditioned to see the world in stark moral contrasts, where loyalty was both armor and prison. As the Red Army closed in on Berlin, the elite bodyguards faced the ultimate test: fear of death, the instinct for self-preservation, and the knowledge of impending defeat collided with their deep-seated indoctrination. Some hesitated, some redoubled their efforts, but all were bound by the same code. The tension is palpable. Every hallway in the bunker, every stairwell, every entry point was both a potential route of escape and a site of ultimate accountability. For the audience, this creates an immersive understanding of the pressure, both physical and psychological, these men endured in their final hours. Within the bunker's dim corridors, trust and suspicion intermingled. Officers relied on one another to maintain security, yet each was acutely aware that failure could mean not only death but disgrace. The audience gains insight into the personal stakes of ideological loyalty, fear, ambition, and devotion intertwined, creating a web of psychological tension that defined the final days of the Third Reich. Ultimately, these men epitomized the extreme consequences of absolute loyalty. Their actions, whether courageous, cruel, or merely obedient, were framed by a worldview that demanded unwavering service above all else. For viewers, understanding this elite loyalty is essential. It illuminates not only military strategy and hierarchy, but also the human capacity for ideological devotion, moral conflict, and the ultimate cost of serving a collapsing empire. Suspense, curiosity, and reflection converge as the narrative sets the stage for the next phase of their final hours. As the walls of Berlin crumbled, every corridor became a battlefield. Every soldier faced a choice between duty and survival. The SS units stationed at Hitler's bunker, once symbols of unwavering loyalty, now confronted chaos on every side. Explosions reverberated through streets above, and smoke curled from burning buildings, searing the air with acrid tension. For viewers, the scene is immediate. The familiar order of military precision dissolves into desperation, and each movement is weighted with mortal risk. Inside the bunker, officers coordinated defensive positions, relaying fragmented orders to scattered teams. Panic threatened to undermine discipline, yet many held their posts, aware that the Führer's life and the last vestiges of the regime depended on them. The audience experiences the intensity of split-second decision-making. when to fire, when to retreat, when to risk exposure. Fear and adrenaline dictated behavior, yet ideological devotion still anchored their resolve, even as defeat loomed unavoidable. Outside, street-to-street fighting created a labyrinth of danger. Every intersection, stairwell, and rubble-strewn alley presented the possibility of sudden death. SS squads moved in small groups, engaging in brutal skirmishes with Soviet soldiers, attempting to secure corridors and protect escape routes. The audience is drawn into the tension. One misstep could be fatal, one moment of hesitation a sentence. Yet amidst the chaos, acts of calculated bravery emerged, soldiers covering one another, improvising barricades, and making desperate choices that balanced duty against instinctive self-preservation. The psychological strain was relentless. Many knew the Red Army would not show mercy to those associated with Hitler's inner circle. Officers grappled with anticipation of capture, the potential for summary execution, and the moral weight of their past actions. For viewers, this heightened suspense. The soldiers' internal conflicts mirror the physical dangers surrounding them, creating a dual layer of tension that sustains attention. As the hours dragged on, communications broke down. Orders were lost, messengers intercepted, and confusion mounted. Yet some units maintained cohesion, advancing and retreating in careful rhythm, demonstrating both training and desperation. Civilians in the streets, caught between armies, added to the unpredictability, further complicating decisions. The audience feels the unpredictability of urban combat, understanding the interplay of human courage, panic, and moral responsibility under fire. Ultimately, the last stand of these SS units encapsulated the collapse of the Third Reich itself. Chaos, fear, loyalty, and survival interwoven in a deadly tapestry. Their choices whether to fight, flee, or surrender were amplified by ideological indoctrination, personal honor, and the immediate threat of annihilation. For viewers, this section immerses them in the human drama of the bunker's defenders, maintaining suspense while providing historical and psychological insight into soldiers operating at the very edge of a collapsing empire. Every corridor, every decision, every heartbeat carried consequence, leaving the audience suspended in anticipation of what would come next. Some tried to flee through rubble-strewn streets. Others faced the barrel of an enemy rifle. The moment Hitler's life ended, the SS units stationed at his bunker were thrust into chaos unlike any they had experienced before. The meticulous hierarchy that had guided their every action collapsed instantly, leaving men who had been trained to defend the Führer with no clear orders, only the urgent imperative to survive. For viewers, this is the first exposure to the raw uncertainty these soldiers faced. Instinctive survival clashing with ideological loyalty. As Soviet and Allied forces swept through Berlin, SS squads navigated the labyrinth of destroyed streets, broken buildings, and chaotic civilian movements. Some attempted to negotiate surrender, waving white flags or approaching enemy lines with hands raised, their elite training now useless against the reality of defeat. Others, gripped by fear or denial, pressed forward, hoping the chaos would conceal them. The audience experiences tension in real time. Each step, each decision could mean survival or death, and the stakes were immediate and absolute. Tactical decisions became crucial. Officers had to decide whether to stay together, splitting up to improve chances, or risk moving as a single unit through enemy-occupied zones. Terrain, timing, and enemy patrols dictated every movement. Some men sought underground routes, sewer systems, and abandoned buildings to evade detection. The narrative draws viewers into the nerve-wracking unpredictability. Even the most carefully planned escape could fail in an instant, reinforcing suspense and engagement. The psychological pressure was immense. Fear of execution, knowledge of atrocities committed, and uncertainty about what awaited if captured created intense internal conflict. Many SS personnel wrestled with shame, desperation, and survival instincts simultaneously. For viewers, this dual tension, physical danger paired with moral reckoning, enhances emotional investment, allowing them to empathize with the soldiers' human vulnerability while confronting the consequences of their past actions. Encounters with enemy forces were sudden and often violent. Some soldiers were captured after brief firefights. Others surrendered after being cornered in bombed-out buildings. The rapid shift from authority to vulnerability created a surreal environment. Men who had once wielded power over life and death were now at the mercy of advancing armies. Suspense is amplified as the audience follows each potential outcome, uncertain which men would survive, which would be detained, and which might meet immediate death. Ultimately, the surrender or demise of these SS units underscores the fragility of power in the face of overwhelming force. Every decision, every footstep carried life or death weight. Viewers are immersed in the chaotic final hours, witnessing human behavior under extreme duress, and understanding the intersection of strategy, fear, and moral consequence. The scene closes with unresolved tension, compelling audiences to anticipate the next chapter, the consequences of capture, interrogation, and the long shadow cast by history over those who survived. From masters of fear to prisoners of scrutiny, their roles reversed in an instant. Once commanding authority within Hitler's inner circle, the SS soldiers, who had survived the bunker's collapse, now found themselves stripped of power, under the constant gaze of Allied and Soviet forces. Every gesture, every word, was scrutinized. Every hesitation could be interpreted as deceit or defiance. For viewers, this reversal immediately establishes tension, highlighting the psychological weight of captivity and the fragility of human control under extreme circumstances. Captured men were transported to temporary holding facilities, where conditions were stark and intimidating. Interrogators, trained to detect deception and extract information, employed both psychological and procedural methods to gather intelligence. Officers and soldiers alike faced questioning about troop movements, locations of weaponry, and knowledge of the Nazi command network. The narrative immerses viewers in suspense. As answers were sought, fear and uncertainty dominated, and every revelation carried potential consequences. The psychological pressure was relentless. Captives were aware of their previous crimes and the retribution likely awaiting them. Interrogation methods included isolation, repetitive questioning, and strategic confrontation with evidence of atrocities. Even without physical coercion, the environment of observation, uncertainty, and moral reckoning created immense stress. For viewers, the emotional engagement is immediate. Empathy is paired with moral reflection, as audiences confront the complexity of justice applied to perpetrators who had inflicted fear and death. Allied and Soviet intelligence aimed to reconstruct the final days of the Third Reich, and these elite SS personnel were crucial sources. The narrative emphasizes how carefully interrogators extracted details, often pitting prisoners against one another or presenting them with corroborating documents to confirm the truth. Suspense builds as viewers are drawn into the procedural intensity of intelligence gathering, understanding both the historical necessity and the human consequences of these methods. Daily routines in detention were strictly controlled, reinforcing the shift from autonomy to complete subjection. Meals, movement, and interactions were monitored, reminding prisoners of their vulnerability. The contrast between prior command over life and the enforced passivity of captivity creates dramatic tension for viewers, highlighting both vulnerability and the psychological complexity of facing retribution. Ultimately, detainment and interrogation not only revealed military secrets, but also imposed moral and psychological reckoning. Each captured SS soldier navigated the immediate physical constraints, the fear of punishment, and the confrontation with their own actions during the war. For the audience, this section blends suspense, historical immersion, and moral engagement. They witness the transformation from feared enforcers to subjects of scrutiny, understanding the gravity of justice, accountability, and human behavior under extreme duress. The narrative leaves viewers anticipating the long-term consequences these men would face, setting the stage for subsequent exploration of trials, punishments, and historical memory. Some faced the gavel, others slipped into obscurity, leaving only questions of justice behind. Following the surrender and detainment of Hitler's SS units, Allied and Soviet authorities began the painstaking process of determining accountability. Soldiers and officers who had once wielded power over life and death now faced interrogation, investigation, and for many, the stark possibility of imprisonment or execution. The audience is drawn into the contrast between prior authority and sudden vulnerability, a tension that underscores both suspense and moral reflection. The Nuremberg trials became the most visible and consequential legal reckoning. Selected SS officers were transported to tribunals where evidence, including documents, survivor testimonies, and wartime reports, was meticulously presented. Judges weighed complicity, rank, and direct involvement in atrocities to determine sentences. The procedural rigor of these trials created both intellectual curiosity and suspense for viewers. Each courtroom moment revealed the gravity of past actions, while the uneven nature of justice, some escaping full accountability, added moral tension. Not all SS personnel were immediately identifiable or apprehended. Some officers had assumed false identities, fled to remote areas, or concealed evidence of their roles. Investigators faced the dual challenge of piecing together fragmented records and confronting the sheer scale of human cruelty. For viewers, this evokes intrigue, the tension between hidden perpetrators and the meticulous work of authorities, engages curiosity and emotional investment. Prison sentences varied, with some officers serving long terms under strict conditions, while others faced summary execution depending on location, rank, or local directives. Survival depended not only on rank, but also on luck, timing, and the discretion of captors. The audience experiences suspense as individual stories unfold, some marked by accountability, others by impunity, highlighting the unpredictability of post-war justice. In addition to formal trials, informal reckonings occurred. Soviet forces and local populations sometimes met captured SS members with immediate reprisals or labor assignments, designed to punish and rehabilitate through grueling work. These measures, though less visible in historical documentation, reveal a broader societal response to atrocities and maintain audience engagement through tension and moral contemplation. The broader historical context situates these outcomes within the rebuilding of post-war Europe. Courts, tribunals, and occupying authorities sought not only to administer justice, but also to establish historical record, prevent resurgence, and communicate moral lessons to future generations. For viewers, understanding the interplay between legal, moral, and societal mechanisms enhances both intellectual and emotional engagement, creating a multidimensional perspective on accountability. Ultimately, the trials and consequences of the SS units reflect a complex interplay of justice, morality, and historical memory. Audience members are encouraged to reflect on fairness, ethical responsibility, and the enduring impact of human actions under extreme authority. Suspense, curiosity, and moral engagement are maintained as viewers confront both the outcomes of accountability and the questions left unresolved, setting the stage for broader reflection on legacy and memory. In the following section, their names live in records, whispers of duty, loyalty, and the cost of blind obedience. The SS units that once defended Hitler's bunker left an indelible mark on history, but their memory is as complex as it is instructive. Historians, scholars, and documentary filmmakers have sought to piece together their actions, motivations, and the human consequences of unwavering loyalty to a destructive ideology. For viewers, this duality of operational discipline and moral failure creates intellectual engagement and emotional tension, inviting reflection on both the past and contemporary lessons. Archival records reveal the hierarchy, structure, and operational protocols of these elite units, while survivor testimonies and post-war interviews provide first-hand accounts of both fear and brutality. Documentaries and academic works analyze the psychological conditioning, propaganda influence, and peer dynamics that shape these soldiers' decisions. For audiences, these insights highlight the interplay between obedience, ideology, and individual agency, encouraging a nuanced understanding of human behavior under extreme pressure. The myths and legends surrounding bunker units. have also shaped public perception. Stories of fanatical devotion, last-minute defections, and dramatic final stands have become intertwined with historical fact. Some accounts exaggerate heroism or cruelty, creating a narrative tension that viewers find compelling. This interplay between myth and reality sustains curiosity, as audiences are challenged to distinguish documented evidence from legend, heightening engagement and critical thinking about sources, interpretation, and narrative reliability. Cultural memory further influences how these soldiers are portrayed. Literature, films, and television series explore themes of loyalty, obedience, and moral responsibility, often dramatizing the personal dilemmas faced in the bunker's final days. Such portrayals resonate because they humanize historical actors without excusing their choices, providing viewers with emotional access to moral conflict while reinforcing ethical reflection. The audience experiences both suspense and moral tension, empathizing with the psychological stakes while condemning participation in atrocities. Military, ethics, and leadership studies also draw lessons from these historical examples. Analyses of blind obedience, hierarchical pressure, and the consequences of unquestioned authority offer enduring insights for contemporary military, civic, and organizational contexts. For viewers, understanding these lessons transforms historical fascination into intellectual curiosity and moral contemplation, reinforcing the relevance of past events to present-day questions of ethics and decision-making under pressure. Ultimately, the historical memory of the SS bunker units serves as a mirror, reflecting both the dangers of rigid ideological adherence and the enduring need for moral vigilance. By examining records, narratives, and cultural interpretations, audiences are invited to consider the costs of loyalty without conscience and the broader implications for society. Suspense, curiosity, and ethical reflection converge, leaving viewers with a nuanced understanding of history, the human mind under duress, and the lessons that persist long after the guns fell silent.